Hey everyone, I hope that we're having a good week. I hope that you are all finding peace while following this election cycle. I hope that everything for your holiday seasons goes over smoothly. Today we're actually going to be talking about Chapter 9, which is managing conflict in relationship, which actually feels like a really appropriate time to be talking about something like this. So for this week, we are going to be talking about managing conflict, best ways to manage conflict. We're going to describe the factors that lead to productive conflict, because not all conflict is bad. Sometimes conflict helps us identify differences that we get the opportunity to band together and try to reconcile or solve. So we're going to try to identify conflict triggers in ourselves and others. We're going to explain the forces that influence how people handle conflict. And we're going to evaluate and employ strategies for managing conflict in different situations and articulate the way in which we can de-escalate and repair painful conflict. All right, so the definition of conflict for today is going to be an interaction between two or more interdependent people who perceive they have contradictory goals or scarce resources. So their goals conflict, or there's not enough availability of resources, whatever the resource may be. Conflict management. Conflict management is going to be the way we engage in conflict and address disagreements with our relational partners. So whether that's your significant other or a parent, anybody you're in relationship with, you can have conflict with. Even people that you're not really in relationship with, you can have conflict with. Some girl in the line at the grocery store who's being very rude, we can have conflict with, but those conflicts are significantly less important for us to try to manage and reconcile. So unproductive conflict. Unproductive conflict is going to be conflict that is managed poorly, conflict that has a negative impact on the individuals in the relationship, and it can lead to lack of well-being in the workplace and health problems, can increase anxiety, it can have all kinds of effects on our mental health, and it really can just deeply harm us, even in ways that we're not even aware of cognitively. Productive conflict. Productive conflict is going to be conflict that is managed effectively, conflict that that fosters healthy debate when people are actively engaged, and it leads to better decision making, and it spurs relationship growth. When we are able to talk through something and have a healthy conversation about what something might mean for us, or just manage our differences, we're more likely to develop in our relationship or take the next step or be able to have a deeper understanding for one another, because you understand how to get past those differences and disagreements, and it makes you as a unit stronger, whether that's with your family or your friends or your partner. Conflict triggers. So some things that may trigger conflicts are inaccurate perceptions, right? If we think something about somebody that may not be true, or incompatible goals when we're not reaching for the same thing, like incompatible goals and who we want for the presidency, or even relational transgressions, transgressions being the set of codes that you have that are acceptable or not acceptable for your relationship. So an example of this would be cheating in your relationship, or lying. And then provocation are the intentional instigation of conflict. When someone's just trying to pick a fight because they're in a bad mood, and they just feel like fighting. I don't know if you ever have those days. I do sometimes. And then behaviors that spark conflict. Those can be aggression, when something is perceptually unfair, or when a different party is being irresponsible, in your opinion, or you've done something irresponsible in their opinion. Power dynamics. So factors affecting conflict, one of them is power dynamics. And this can be a difference in power related to resources, when someone has more access to resources like finances, or decision making, like if your boss at work makes a decision that you may not agree with. But power dynamics exist everywhere. There's power dynamics in every relationship that we may or may not be aware of or cognitively thinking about. But typically, there is a power dynamic that may allow us to feel frustrated or may allow us to feel very sure of ourselves in certain contexts that can lead to conflict if your partner or your friend or your parent disagrees with you. Like even the power dynamic from parent to child or teacher to student or, I don't know, friend to friend sometimes, given the context of how you met or access to resources that we may not even be aware of. Attitudes towards conflict. This attitude can be something that affects conflict for sure. It affects how willing you are to discuss disagreements. If you just think you're right, you don't even want to discuss it, it is a non-negotiable, then you're probably pretty unlikely to reconcile that conflict. Or something that I've seen often is people posting their political opinions on Facebook at this time and being like, this is not up for negotiation, where they're presenting a conflict or something that you may conflict with as a friend or a relative, but they're not even willing to have those conversations or discuss their disagreements. And this can affect how productively you can handle conflict. Taking conflict personally, TCP, is a destructive tendency to see all disagreements as a personal assault. And sometimes this is something that's really hard to do, but it's something that we really have to disassociate ourselves from if we're going to handle conflicts in a way that can be healthy for us. Communication climate. So communication climate is another factor that affects conflict. In a defensive climate, the environment is something where communicators feel threatened and so they need to defend themselves. Or a supportive climate, which is an environment in which communicators can honestly examine conflict. So if you're in an environment where you feel like you have to be defensive, you're probably less likely to productively solve that conflict as opposed to an environment where you feel safe and supported. Culture and conflict. So culture has the capacity to seriously affect conflict, especially when we look at the differences between individualistic and collectivist cultures, because individualists really prioritize their personal needs, their rights, their identity, and their autonomy with decision making, whereas collectivist cultures really emphasize group identity and needs. So if you're in a relationship with someone who values the group, but you value your individual rights, you're more than likely going to come into conflict over something. Like you want to see a movie, but I don't know, someone in your family needs you to babysit, like you're probably going to be in conflict over what's more important, whether that's your own individual personal time or helping someone out in your family or putting the needs of yourself over the needs of the group, if that makes sense. And then culture can also be a problem in high context cultures and low context cultures. High context cultures rely more on indirect verbal messages and nonverbal communication. And low context cultures expect verbal directness and people to say exactly what they mean. So like the United States is a low context culture. Say what you mean and mean what you say. I can't know what you want from me unless you explicitly say it. But a high context culture would be somewhere like Japan, where they have a lot of unspoken rules and expectations of you when participating in that culture. And so it's really, really important for us to be aware of all of those differences before entering a culture, so that way we don't cause any unintentional offense. Culture and conflict. Co-cultures affect how we deal with conflict, whether that's gender-based or age-based. There are expectations that may fall on a certain generation that may not fall on another. And that also could be rise for conflict based on the co-cultures you participate in or the co-cultures expectations of a certain time or just of a certain belief. Communication channel. So communication channel can just really deeply be a cause for conflict, right? So poor channel choices can lead to conflict. If we're texting someone and we make a joke and the joke doesn't land, like, sorry, and the joke doesn't land, that can definitely be cause for conflict. So like the mediated conversations that we're having through email or through text or over the phone, we just need to be more aware of and more intentional when having those conversations, because those can often lead to conflict. Channel choices affect conflict management, like if you're breaking up with somebody and you decide to text them. Channel choice has a huge effect on the way that we react to things. Some things are totally appropriate and some things are seen as not at all appropriate. Digital media has created new sources of unproductive conflict, such as trolling and cyberbullying. And digital media really affects the way that we are able to communicate. And I think oftentimes we see these channels as a way to deal with conflict, or very easily creates conflict that can be lost sometimes in translation. Like, for example, when I'm texting my dad, he will often just text me K. Like, I'll be like, hey dad, I'm coming down today to visit you. It's a long drive. I'll see you soon. Can't wait. Love you. Bye. Like this really long text message, and he'll text me back K. So just better understanding like people's uses for media, and for mediated conversation, because he doesn't mean K, like in the way that we would understand it. Like if my friend texted me K, I'd be super butthurt. But since he has texted me K, I just understand that that's easy for him to send, and he'll say what he needs to say when we're in person. So understanding those communication channels, understanding that other people may have different expectations of those communication channels, so we need to be aware of those before engaging in conversations that may lead to conflict through those mediated systems. All right, strategies for managing conflict, escapist strategies. So if someone is using an escapist strategy, they're avoiding or not addressing the conflict. They are pretending it didn't happen, or they are avoiding you altogether. They're obliging or accommodating another person just so they can be done with the conflict, wash their hands of it. It's a huge strategy to just avoid. So that would be an escapist strategy. Competitive strategies. This would be using direct fighting to engage in conflict to assert personal goals. So being competitive in a fight probably isn't gonna be very successful, especially if both of you are really competitive, unless it works for you, right? Like, who am I to say what's better or not for you? But using indirect fighting to assert personal goals without open conflict. So you can use both direct or indirect fighting. So indirect fighting would probably be something like passive-aggressive conversations where you're not directly talking about it, but you're talking around it. And then direct fighting is just facing it head on, duking it out, seeing who comes out on top, right? Cooperative strategies. Cooperative strategies has shown to benefit the relationship and serve mutual rather than individual goals. So you're cooperating to try to better understand the other person and try to serve both of you, as opposed to just putting one of you on top as the clear winner of this fight. And this management strategy uses solutions that benefits both parties overall. Cooperative strategies part 2, compromising. So compromising includes finding the middle ground between often two extreme positions. So if you have an extreme opinion and your partner has an extreme position, this would be finding the middle ground. Finding the compromise that typically both of you are not super happy about, but it is a compromise. You both can agree to it. It's a good meeting spot for you both. Cooperative strategies 3, collaborating. So collaborating means focusing ideas, asking probing questions so we try to understand the person and not just force our ideas down their throat. So when we ask probing questions, we really allow ourselves to get the full understanding and paint the full picture of what it is that they believe and why they believe it. It uses disclosure, it plays devil's advocate, you disclose things about yourself, and then you just ask questions to get a better understanding of the position. And you address underlying needs, because when you fully understand the issue, you can address the real problem, the root of it, for a win-win situation where you both get something out of it. Apology. So reconciliation, the last step. Reconciliation looks like two things. It looks like apology and forgiveness. Apology is admitting wrongdoing and taking responsibility for your role in the conflict. That may not be you taking responsibility for all of the conflict, because conflict takes two. I guess you can have an internal conflict, but Conflict takes two. If you're having an external conflict, you're probably having a conflict with somebody else. And you both have done wrong in this conflict. And then forgiveness, letting go and being able to move beyond the conflict. Letting go is the most important part, and typically we don't see forgiveness until the apology has occurred. But reconciliation is the biggest part of conflict. And that is all that I have for you today. I hope that you are all doing well. Please email me if there's anything I can do for you. Even if you want to have meetings and just talk about your feelings, we can drink hot chocolate and talk. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. Just a reminder, you have a paper due not this week, but next. Make sure you take a look at that before it gets too close to the deadline. Email me if you have any questions, and if you want me to look at your paper, make sure you email it to me a week before, so that way I have some time to review it and give you some good honest feedback that'll help get you the grade that you want. All right, all, I hope you're having a good one. Talk to you later.